talk a little more about this latest round of negotiations and talks with Nicholas Waller, managing editor at New Europe. All right, Nicholas, we just heard lots and lots and lots of talk there. When you consider the EU and when you consider Europe as a whole, how much does the action regarding this conflict match the talk?
That's kind of the million-dollar question right now. Europe, for the past 8 years, ever since the circumstances in Crimea erupted after the annexation, has been relatively weak in regards to its response to Russia. And from the Ukrainian perspective, they have been unreliable. And I think that the reaction to the invasion from the 24th of February has been somewhat unprecedented, but the real question is how long Europe is ready to stay the course in regards to actually being relatively tough on Moscow. This is in regards to how long they're going to keep the sanctions in place, and of course, most importantly, to continue to feed the Ukrainian military with lethal hardware.
Yeah, so it's been said many times by many analysts that one thing the EU is very bad at is foreign policy. But now we're seeing them forced to act with conflict inside Europe. I mean, we've seen unity, certainly, on sanctions, in other respects. We're also seeing them being willing to accept these applications in an urgent matter for joining the EU. I guess you could say that is something, that a show of unity right now is more than they've done in the past.
I would agree with that to a certain degree, but one development that actually it flew a little bit under the radar in the last few days was the EU's package for defensive military equipment to Ukraine, that they were going to speed through and cut all the red tape and do as quickly as possible. But one detail that was rather important in there was the provision of combat airplanes. And almost as quickly as that was agreed upon, it fell apart in very typical bureaucratic EU fashion.
Right.
And what ended up happening was, as has been the case in many instances, we can even discuss all the way back to the mid-1990s during the wars in the former Yugoslavia, the Americans had to step in and actually sort of take the lead on facilitating the prospect of this process even playing out, which we don't exactly know whether or not that actually will come to fruition. Blinken has been talking a lot, quite a bit, the last day or two about a potential deal with Poland on this. But, the solidarity has been, I would say, a bit here and there, very 50-50. And I'm not seeing a lot of reassuring gestures that this solidarity that they're showing right now, and I give them full credit for acting in a way that has not been typical of the EU. But the question is, how long will that last?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the time to act, and when I say militarily, I mean supplying, not boots on the ground, was a week ago. It was before. I guess on one side, as you say, you could say that for the way the EU works, this is urgent and this is moving quickly, but it's not quite quickly enough for the Ukrainian president, who's literally begging the world for more equipment. But we just heard Boris Johnson, when he was meeting with his Dutch and Canadian counterparts, saying, we can't go back to this being the new normal, like we did after Crimea. We can't just accept this as everyone did before. So I guess everybody is saying now, everyone's agreeing that the time for action really was then. It was after 2014.
Well, yes, Johnson is 100% right about that. The biggest mistake that happened after 2014, and there was a little bit of a very complicated and very extensive reason as to why Europe and the wider West didn't react more stringently towards the Kremlin, particularly after the conflict really began, where you actually had combat operations going on in the Donbass. Part of the reason for that was that it was considered, I think, and having been in conversation with a lot of people who were policy level in that regard, was that it was a limited conflict. Moscow was not committing massive troops into the Donbass. It had if you want to call kind of a perfect storm situation in Crimea, where they had a large percentage of the population who was pro-Russian. That went back many years, long before 2014.
Good point.
In addition to an enormous naval base and the Black Sea Fleet, which was already based there. In fact, that the Russian Black Sea Fleet actually outnumbered the Ukrainian Black Sea Fleet before 2014. This, on the other hand, is an entirely different situation. It's a full-fledged invasion and a full-fledged unilateral military operation that absolutely contravenes all international law and has not been seen in Europe since the 1940s, early 1940s. And in regards to whether or not Europe will continue to support Ukraine, I think it really very much comes down to two main factors. One, how much the Europeans will be ready to bear the burden of the economic fallout that is obviously being felt already, and just how long the Ukrainians are able to continue defending themselves, as they have been for the past 10 days. And
Got it.
It is important to note here, too, that what is different between 8 years ago and now is that because of the ferociousness of Putin's invasion, which is bearing all the hallmarks of other conflicts that he's been involved in, and we see the shelling of civilians, the destruction of urban areas, many of which look very similar to the first conflict that Putin was involved with in 1999 when he obliterated Chechnya.
Sure.
And it appears that for so long as the Russians are looking to be relatively bogged down because of several miscalculations, this may give the Europeans a sense that they can continue the support that they have, and following up on what Boris Johnson was saying, that it's true. There is no opportunity here to go back to
there's really been no appetite to provoke Putin into doing something like this, and for good reason. But then again, here we are now. All right, Nick, really good to talk to you.